Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, familiar faces back in the mix in 2024, both on the field and on the sideline, and jogging a memory of my beef with the mayor of Tupelo, Mississippi. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for making us your first listen. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. And we had today's conversation on our list to play out this week, but didn't exactly know we'd have such a fantastic and legendary tie-in to a returning production conversation. You may or may not have seen some returning production as it relates to Red Raider football in 2024, ranked among some other peers nationally here this week. We'll get into where Texas Tech is on that list, particularly compared to some of their Big 12 counterparts. We'll talk about some of the most valuable as far as those returners are concerned, and maybe some of those position groups where you don't quite have as much coming back. That will be some areas of focus, but then just falling in our lap, a nice little tie-in to kick off today's conversation. And that was something that is worth noting in West Texas and across Red Raider Nation, and that is the return of one Darcel McBath. We saw Texas Tech announce some additional roles and some guys in some new spots, some members of the program shifting to some new positions, new titles as well, but Darcel McBath was one of those on the list, and obviously a very recognizable name, I assume, to most or all Tech fans. He's going to be an analyst on Joey McGuire's staff, and I know you were tweeting about it, a picture of you and John Harris, also legendary, with Darcel, whenever I believe he was a member of the Mississippi State staff once upon a time, but more importantly, he was a member of arguably the greatest Red Raider football team of all time. So it was great to see him back in West Texas.
Yeah, this news, kind of known that something was in the works. Wasn't sure when or if it would all come together, but it put a big smile on my face because I love this guy. He always was smiling. He was a damn good player, and really in your heyday, Cowan. I mean, you think about 05, 06, 07, 08. I mean, he was really right there in the sweet spot, and he started for the last 3 years, played half of the first season he was here. But this wasn't, this was back when most freshmen really weren't playing, or starting as true sophomores. But that's what he did, and played for Carlos Maynard, played next to Daniel Charbonnet for the last year or two, I guess it was. And, he was a second-round pick, folks. I mean, he was one of the best football players that's come through your program in the last 20 plus years, especially at that position, and played in the NFL for 5 years, has been in coaching. But you forget, like that 08 year, he had 7 picks, man. I mean, and 2 of them I think went to the house. So he really made his presence felt. He wasn't just on that 2008 team. No, he was one of the faces, especially on the defensive side of the ball of that team when you were making a lot of national news. But I'm thrilled for all involved here that he's back. I'm thrilled. I think it's great for Joey. I mean, because see, Darcel's path is that he's known Antonio Huffman, all the Mike Leach stops. Okay, so all the people that have kind of worked with Mike at Washington State, Mississippi State, all those things. So the Clay McGuires, the Antonio Huffmans, and then there's other folks elsewhere. But I mean, all those folks have kind of generally, been together over the last 5 to 10 years at these various places. And that's the last time I had seen and talked to Darcel was walking down Beale Street. And Harris and I were like, we know you. He just smiled. I was like, let's get a picture. And I'm glad that we did. And then I talked to him on the field before the game started. And, we were talking about, there's some various other folks that were on that staff that I knew, and talked about Mike and just college football in general and all that stuff. But man, I'm thrilled that he's a Texas kid. And he's now 38 years old, I believe. He's like, close to 40. But I tell you, from a football standpoint, this is like, I don't know if it's like the Jeff Linder type move that Grant McCasland made, but this is a SEC position coach that you are now bringing in to be like an analyst, okay, like extra help. And I think that's a lot of resources. And I think what it also does too, Callan, my final thought on this would be, if something were to happen with, like, say, Coach Yates or one of your defensive assistants, and they like take another job or get hired away, whatever, after this season. I mean, you hope that is not the case, but there's always a lot of movement when it comes to coaches. You now have a built-in, pipeline, like where this is somebody that has coached DBs and corners and whatnot at the Power 5 level for the last 5 to 7 years, Yeah. So anyway, that was also my first thought from Joey's standpoint. It's like, man, this is really solid. But I love the addition. Phenomenal human, great player. He is a Red Raider, and he is back home.
That's right, and not just a part of a great team, but as you referenced there, towards the latter part of the Mike Leach era, he was one of the faces of a resurgent defense after we had gone from, the worst in the country statistical ranking. Couldn't get any worse than you were once upon a time in the early 2000s. You really began to shore up that side of the football, particularly like 2007 through 2009. And with all due respect to Michael Crabtree, Graham Harrell, the great wall of Lubbock, known as the Red Raider offensive line, all tremendous contributors, obviously, to that great year, or those great couple of years. But what you were really doing, getting busy defensively, could be argued as making just as big a difference with some of those guys up front, some of those guys on the edge, and obviously guys like Darcel McBath on the back end of that defense. I have a very specific Darcel McBath memory. I think, one of the final times, or I guess maybe the final time, we saw him in a Red Raider uniform in the Cotton Bowl against the Rebels of Ole Miss at the end of that 2008 season. And I'm traveling out there with some buddies, and of course we're behaving in a responsible way the entire weekend. And we had decided the night before, I hadn't really been a tortilla guy since I was much, much younger, when it was quite the novelty, but I don't really recall the last time I had thrown any tortillas. But we were juiced up the night before at the grocery store, supposed to be gathering some tailgate items. And we come upon the tortilla section, which I think just kind of draws you in as a West Texan. Like, you don't even mean to be there, but you just wind up there. And we're like, yeah, all right, let's throw some tortillas tomorrow. So we stack them about 10 high or whatever. We get them in the game. And just kind of akin to nothing, but associated with this, good buddy of mine, pride and joy of Petersburg, Texas, Chance Willis. He had made an agreement with us that, hey, we ever get up 2 touchdowns, I'm going shirtless. Shirt's coming off, I'm going shirtless. And I don't know if you remember or not, but Darcel McBath himself took an Ole Miss pass into the end zone to put the Red Raiders up by 2 touchdowns, 14-0. It was very early on in the game. But let me tell you, it didn't matter it was early because we were already out of tortillas. We were riding high at that time, my friend. And my friend decided, yeah, I'm going to live up to the agreement. I'm going shirtless. So he's shirtless about 30 minutes into the ball game. And I don't have to spell out the rest of what happened that day. There was some taking it on the chin kind of vibe the rest of the day. But my buddy was a man of honor. He sat there without his shirt on next to all these hooligans from Oxford, Mississippi for, I don't know, another 3 hours as things did not go the way of the Red Raiders. But that's the Red Raider way. But yeah, we shot the tortilla wad pretty early as Darcel was strolling into the end zone. We thought we had it on easy street the rest of the day, but that was not the case. But man, it's great to see him back in the LBK, and obviously for reasons you described, very much wanted to be back in the LBK given where he came from.
I love that stadium. That was the environment at that Cotton Bowl and the environment for Alabama in what would that have been, 2005, was some of the best college football environments I had ever been in. But that stupid stadium has just not been kind to you. I want to say the last 4 times I've been there to watch the Red Raiders, you're 1-3 because, and I may be forgetting something.
Are you talking about the Ticket City victory?
No, you know what? That would be 2-3. Okay, I forgot about that. Seeing I knew I would. You beat Northwestern. You beat Baylor.
Yeah.
Before that started getting switched over into Arlington, and I remember leaving that game, and I got in the car with my dad, and I didn't go home with the team, and I went right down I-30 and watched the Rangers play in the playoffs. So that was a pretty cool day because that was on the natural grass field. You beat Baylor at a time where you were kind of struggling to do such things. But Tuberville was still the coach and all that. But I think after that year, it would then permanently move over to the new stadium in Arlington. But I mean, the USC game, Bama, Ole Miss,
the Cotton Bowl itself, the event, is not been kind to you.
Yeah, and now the actual Cotton Bowl is in Arlington. It's not even at Fair Park. But
just for the sake of posterity, Alabama receiver's knee was down. Touchdown shouldn't have counted, and they were textbook thieves. Should have never been there in the first place. So you check those record books. Maybe Texas Tech has that win on their ledger.
And that kick that went through the uprights, I'll never forget the kid's name that kicked it, Jamie Christensen. I mean, why I remember that, I don't know. But it was like, I mean, it wasn't a wounded duck. It's like there were many snipers up there that had shot that football, but it still sailed through ugly sideways and just went right through the uprights. And I'm like, damn.
The worst looking successful kick that there has ever been. I mean, I think the Tech side was cheering when it came off of his foot because it was an ugly duckling, but somehow made it through. Yeah, the Ole Miss game, I was in one of the end zones right there on the divide. I mean, the stairs were the divide between some Ole Miss fans and Tech fans. So there was some chatter going back and forth, as you might imagine. And I remember there was a couple of fathers with some young sons right beside me and my buddies. And so we were already, chirping with some of these Ole Miss folks, the mayor of Tupelo or something, old bucktooth nipple ring guy in overalls, reminded me of the coach from the Water Boy. And I told my buddy, as we're going back and forth, I wasn't really saying anything. I was just doing some derogatory hand motions. And I told him, well, I don't want to be yelling out expletives in front of these kids, so I'm just going to go with some hand motions. Well, as the temperature begins to heat up, both literally and figuratively, eventually I just had to give hey, such and such. And he said, what happened to just the hand motions? And I just lost control. I had to apologize to the kids. That was a memorable day, but not a score that we want to remember. Maybe someday we'll be back there. It's amazing what one defensive back returning to your town as an analyst can do for jogging the memory, right?
But I'm here for it, man. Those were really good times. And Darcel was a part of a lot of that. So again, echo that glad he is back here. I hope it's for a long time and whatever role that would look like. And he's got a lot of familiar faces here that he would know, Clay McGuire being one of them. But that's 2 in the same offseason that you've kind of brought back. So,
and I don't know if he's got a son on the ground or not that wants to be a Red Raider, but let's get cooking Darcel. We need help in the secondary. All right, let's get actually to these Red Raiders of the 2024 variety. You may or may not have seen this in some recent days. Bill Connolly of ESPN kicks out some advanced statistics from time to time. And he had a national ranking. This was also including FCS programs, so it actually goes 134 teams deep. He had a national ranking of returning production from 2023 to 2024 that we wanted to dive into. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and it's do or die time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, player props, money lines, and a whole lot more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. He had a national ranking of returning production from 2023 to 2024 that we wanted to dive into. Before I do that, Chris, let me give you some of what else he gave us as it relates to this production going back to last year. Last year's top 4 teams with returning production: Kansas, Missouri, Florida State, and Michigan. few pretty good seasons in that group. Those teams went from a combined 35-18 in the prior year, 2022, to 48-7 in 2024. So on the other end of the spectrum, the bottom four production, Kent State, UAB, ECU, and Stanford, went from 23-27 to 10-38. So some of what's there in the gooey middle may not really make a huge impact, but some of those extremes obviously tend to make an impact. And it wasn't lost on me before we get to Texas Tech that 2 of the top 3 in the nation in the Big 12 Conference, 3 of the top 10 in the nation in the Big 12 Conference. Iowa State was number 1 on the list. 86% of their production is back in 2024. Oklahoma State was number 3 on the list. 85% of their production back in 2024. And then the Baylor Bears, they're at number 10 with 79% of their production back in 2024. The Red Raiders wind up 69th nationally as far as this list is concerned, with 61% of their production coming back in 2024. And it kind of leads into what I guess I've been asking myself, because there kind of are some extremes, like where maybe you have a lot of production, then where you're really kind of an open casting call as far as positions are concerned. But I was sort of wondering, am I viewing this team as one that's long in the tooth? Is it seasoned? Is it a young team? Is it an inexperienced team? And I guess that number, 61%, kind of gives you the indication why it's a tough question to answer, sort of, because you have a mixture of both, I guess.
Yeah, because the answer to your question is, when you said, is this team, when you listed off all these things, really the answer is yes.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it depends on just, you have to be more specific and dig down deeper into it. But the thing about returning production, you'll have I had a coach tell me one time that he's like, we got 18 starters back. He's like, yeah, but man, we weren't very good last year.
Stink.
So is that, yeah. God, coach, hey man, you lost 19 starters from last year's team. Yep, we'll miss about 3 of them. So I mean, I will say that I think, I'm looking at the list here, and I think I'm right here. It's either 6 or 7 of the top 10 on that list went to a bowl game last year, and including Oklahoma State and Iowa State. And I think the Baylor thing is interesting, because Baylor was really bad last year, really bad. But they brought in an experienced quarterback, and and so this is one of these things where they bring and they kept a hold of some of their people that I think would have been big portal additions elsewhere. But they just weren't great. And so again, is this like, are you jumping up and down excited about this, or are you like, are we going to squeeze more out of the same dudes? I mean, I don't know. So but like Iowa State, they bring back a lot. I don't know how ultimately good that they are, but I think people are going to tell you that if, like, say, Iowa State and Oklahoma State were to play in the Big 12 championship next year, it wouldn't just shock them based on what you're seeing with just so much being back. They just didn't have a lot enter the portal. They were able to retain with their system. Now, ultimately, you're asking about you're asking about Texas Tech, which is what we want. And you're 69th on this list. 61% of your production comes back, because what Bill Connolly does, he does this exercise every year. What makes it trickier is that all the portal stuff that has gone on here, and he's tried to, I think, bake that into his formula, to where he is factoring that in. I think he kind of even details that if you were an FCS player moving up to an FBS, I really only gave you half credit. So there's all kinds of dynamics here. It's a formula, but it's trying to paint a picture of, because if you think about it, to answer your question, you are very experienced on offense. I mean, you just are. Now, you're not exactly experienced together. You're not experienced like here at Tech, but you are experienced. I mean, you look at the Sterling Porchers, the Davion Carters, the Vinny Scurrys, the Josh Kellys, the Jalen Conyerses. They haven't played a snap for you, but they are very experienced. And I think it kind of goes on and on. Caleb Douglas is not just some green receiver that comes in. because you lost a lot on that side of the ball to the portal, and you lost a lot of production. But so to the point of this conversation, you lost a ton of snaps, starts, and all that from Jerron Bradley, Miles Price, Loic. Keep going. Now, are we upset about that? Are we going, oh man, or do you feel like, there's been an upgrade here, or I kind of like what I've got now? Eye in the beholder, you can, but that's that people need to understand that portion of the conversation, and that it may not be such a bad thing that you're, I don't know, less experienced, but where your numbers show up is the defensive side of the ball. Joey had talked about in the spring, no-name defense and all that. We know how many snaps and starts that Hutchings and Bradford had. You can keep going with your two corners. Miles Cole. I mean, there was a whole bunch of folks that had played a lot of football for you. Rabbit. Rabbit's a 6-year guy. I mean, how many starts walked out the door and are now playing for the Cardinals? So that's where your numbers take a massive hit. But, I mean, didn't they tell you, hey, we're a lot more physical at corner? We needed to be. Wasn't very good last year. So, again, not a shot at Malik Dunlap or Rashad Williams, but maybe your lack of returning production is not such a bad thing with Braden Lux and somebody like Mo Horn or whoever else mans the starting corner spot. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
And that kind of got my attention, that corner comment, because not that you wouldn't want them to be physical, but it's not exactly the first thing I'm thinking about whenever I'm thinking about what I really want in a cornerback. But it's the first thing they mentioned as far as what we want to see changed or what we want to be better at. They want to be more physical on the outside, and I think that may be an attribute that kind of flies under the radar sometimes for that position. You're kind of outlining there what I wanted to finish with, in that not all returning production is created equally. So I was curious to wrap up our conversation, Chris, maybe where you find some of the best value, some of the most potential impact as far as some of these returners. And for the sake of it, let's go ahead and allow newcomers, obviously, to be a part of this. Some of those experienced guys that you've mentioned already, though not experienced in a Red Raider uniform. Is there any position or person that just jumps out and grabs you when you think about not only returning production, but the most valuable returning production? Not only returning production, but the most valuable returning production.
And we're just talking positions?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Or an individual, whatever.
Yeah, like if I could if you could draw it up and say, man, where would I want returning production at, assuming that this player was quality and good and all that, if you could have some they had some experience with them and all that. I mean, obviously you start at quarterback. It's just it's not always a bad thing, but sometimes with a brand new quarterback, there's going to be some trials and tribulations, right? There's going to be some ups and downs, some inconsistencies. They got to play through things. They're going to make mistakes. So that that is kind of, we'll put that one off to the side because that's, everybody's going to say that. The next one I would say is offensive line. You want to and need to be experienced and older on the offensive line in almost every case. Not everyone, but in most cases, individually, together, whatever. But you need experience. It's a very difficult position to play. As we talked about in a show last week, the guys that coach those positions are usually the highest paid assistants on every college football staff, and probably NFL wise too, because there's that much importance and pressure on it. And that's just part of the deal. So, and it's just very rare. Again, we've had plenty of examples to the contrary, but very rare that guys can walk through the door and just suit up and be a well-oiled machine and play well. Those are dudes that are like only here for 3 or 4 years and off to the NFL, like your Manny Ramirez's, your Louis Vasquez's, Adrian Waddles, LaRaven Clark, those types, which all of them NFL guys. But that's a rarity. Rex Richards back in the day, Jack Anderson kind of came in here and had a cup of coffee as a very young player, and he's still, I think, hanging around the NFL. But point is that's just a position that typically you got to grow them up. You got to hold on to them in this day and age, and then you hold on to them for dear life. Okay, so there's that. I would say that Tech's benefits this year, which I think, like, Oklahoma State has one of the best linebacking corps, certainly in the Big 12 and in the country. Okay, as far as production, what the expectations are of those players, but like Texas Tech, you're probably not going to pop the experience meter a bunch here, based on Ben Roberts really only playing one season and Jacob Rodriguez playing, the better half of what, a season over a 2-year span.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some partials.
But I'm going to say that they feel, and I think that every coach and player over there would agree, they're both old souls. They are both, to me, they are experienced. They're very bright and high IQ and durable and all of the stuff. And I feel like that, while it's probably not near as experienced as others' positions, but I feel like that's also your interior linebacker spots, I guess is what I'm getting at. On if you could pick experience to have on a team somewhere, it would be that, because you knew how scary it was playing Oregon when Ben's first start was there, and you got all this eye candy and the chrome helmets and speed and play calls that are just whatever. There's a lot on that player mentally. And that's why if you have guys that are just your Zach Thomas types, the guys that are high IQ, that don't bust and that can make plays and all that stuff, it makes everybody's job easier. Because the hardest guy to replace on that defense is going to be Rabbit, because of what he knew mentally and how he helped everybody else with all that. So with linebacker, that would be what else I would say is your equivalent to your – everybody's going to call it something different, whether it's your strong safety, your free safety, your boundary safety, whoever in whatever defense you have in alignment, whoever's going to kind of quarterback and be in charge, that's where you'd want experience, and so, I don't know if I answered your question, but you have it at receiver, you have it at tight end, you have it on the offensive line. You've got some on the defensive line now with DeBraylon Carroll and James Hansen and Quincy Ledet. You're not young or green there up front at all, but there's a lot of faces in the secondary and some of your depth pieces that just haven't done it a lot. That's why Joey kept calling them the no-name defense. He wasn't taking a shot. We just don't know who the playmakers are just yet, but we will.
And just for clarity's sake, you meant eye candy from a football standpoint.
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying
I know you're around on game day. You see what's my wife's up in
a lot of shifts, motions.
Okay,
Stuff meant to confuse the linebacker. Okay,
I thought you were just talking about this transition into the era where these young ladies dress like Rihanna on game day, just wearing sheer curtains as clothing. And as a new father of a daughter, this is a very concerning development. But nonetheless, all can be very distracting to anybody on the field. So just wanted to make sure it was on the list as well. I think I would stagger, if we were talking about guys actually in place, I'd stagger at something like this. Offensive line returning production, biggest question mark as to how that's going to work out for you. Wide receiver returning production, semi question mark as to how it's going to work out for you. They've been impactful elsewhere, but can they do it in red and black? And then the two at the top of the list, I think I would have to go with the linebackers. I was going to mention them, certainly. Probably number 2 on the list, but number 1, I don't think I can get away from the Brahma Bull of the 806. Taj Brooks, obviously, you know what you're going to get out of that guy. So I would stagger at something like that as far as where the value is or the reliable value will be for Texas Tech whenever the fall does come around. Let us know how you feel about that. Would love to have your voice heard there in the YouTube comments. Best way you can help us grow the show is to just comment anything below. Good stuff today, Chris. Jogging some of those memories, some fun, some not so fun, a lot blurry, at least in the in-between, at least for me. I know you were working most of those game days, but I was working on a hangover. Nonetheless, a great time was had by all, and welcome back to the 806 for one Darcel McBath, man. Appreciate your time as always. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks, Calvin. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Make sure you're subscribed out there on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss a thing. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.